Good morning. How many of you would love to keep pet animals at home? I hope everybody would be interested in keeping pet animals. Everybody would love it. But it is not an easy task. Keeping a pet animal at home is not so easy because you need to know a lot many things about these pet animals, their habits, their interests, their likes and dislikes, their food habits. And of course, when they fall sick, you have to be extremely careful. So it is not often so easy to keep animals at home, pet animals at home. So today we are going to see the experiences of Kevin Maxwell, who was keeping a strange animal, an otter, for a pet. So Kevin Maxwell is a Scottish naturalist. Naturalist means a person who is an expert in studying animals and plants. And is an author best known for his work with the otters. He wrote a book titled Ring of Bright Waters, in which he was speaking about how he brought an otter from Iraq to England and how he raised it in Scotland. So Gavin Maxwell actually was living in a cottage in Camusferna in the Western Highlands in Scotland. So this area is the yellow ringed area is the Western Highlands in Scotland. So he had a pet dog named Johnny. So unfortunately enough, that pet dog died. And the poet was so crestfallen. He was so disappointed. And he could not even think of keeping another dog for a pet. He was so unhappy. But soon he realized that life without a pet is very difficult. He was feeling extremely lonely. And in 1956, he was in Iraq. He was traveling in southern Iraq. And the thought of keeping an otter for a pet had already crossed his mind. So that thought had already entered into his brain that he would keep an otter for a pet. And he mentioned his desire to one of his friends when he was going to Basra along with him to collect mails from Europe. And his friend replied that, very casually he replied that he could collect one from the Tigris marshes because there they were found in plenty. In Tigris marshes, the otters were found in plenty like mosquitoes, and they were caught by the Arabs and tamed and kept them at home as pets. So that was what he was told. So this Basra is this part in Iraq, Basra. There are two rivers flowing through Iraq. One is Euphrates River, this one, and another is Tigris River, this one. And the Tigris marshes, this area is the Tigris marshes. And so he was told that he could collect one from the Tigris marshes. So reaching there in Basra, he found that his mail hadn't arrived. His friend's mail had arrived, but his mail did not come. So his friend collecting the mail, he went back, and writer had to spend a few more days to get his mail, collect his mail. And after collecting his mail, when he came back to his room, he found two Arabs squatting on the floor. You see a person squatting, the picture of a person squatting. So he found two Arabs squatting on the floor of his room. And these Arabs handed the writer a note which read, "Here is your otter." So they were keeping a sack by the side of them and it was squirming, twisting, because it had the otter in it. So it was squirming, it was twisting about. And the note said, read, "Here is your otter." And apparently, writer's friend had sent the otter for him. So writer says that a new phase of life started with the opening of that sack. With the opening of that sack, a new phase of his life started, and that new phase is not going to end till the end of his life. That new phase of life is the life of keeping an otter as a pet at home. And this life is not going to end till his death. So that was what he was telling. And the creature that came out from the sack appeared like a medievally conceived dragon. Dragon is a creation of Middle Ages. It's an imaginary creature of the Middle Ages. And it appeared like a dragon, medievally conceived dragon. It's an imagination of Middle Ages. Okay, so it was totally covered in mud, and the mud had dried out, and you see it had furs, and the fur had been totally covered in mud, and it got dried, and it appeared like a pointed scales. Writer says that he was not able to see Mij in its original color for almost a month. He was able to see it in its original color only after a month. And he named this otter as Mijbil. For short, he calls it Mij. And Mijbil belonged to a species which was previously unknown to the scientific world. And the zoologists named it. They christened it or named it as Litrogale perspicillata maxwelli or Maxwell's otter. They named it so because it was previously unknown to the scientific world, and the moment it was known, when it was known, the otter was with Maxwell, and thereby it was named as Maxwell's otter. So initially he was neither hostile nor friendly. He was neither unfriendly nor friendly. But soon he became a very friendly creature. Earlier he had no interest in his surroundings. He had a total apathy, lack of interest for his surroundings. But soon he lost his apathy and started taking a very keen interest in his surroundings. And then the writer took him to the bathroom. When he was taken to the bathroom, he was wild with joy, extremely excited, and he jumped into the bathtub filled with water and made enough movements to spill the water out of the bathtub. And the movements he made was similar to the movements made by a hippopotamus in water. So you're spilling water, and he came to know that this was the characteristic nature of otters. This is the characteristic nature of otters. They were very angry with the static water. Static water is very provoking for otters. So it causes anger or some other reaction. So that's why it was making enough movements. The static water in the bathtub provoked him, and he started making enough movements to spill the water. Even a single drop of water is to be spread out. That is the characteristic nature of otters. He came to know it later. So 2 days later, when writer opened his bedroom door, Mij ran out of it. He escaped out of the bedroom, and the writer followed him and found his tail disappearing in the direction of the bathroom. Coming into the bathroom, he was surprised to see Mij was fumbling on the tap in the bathroom, the chromium taps. He's fumbling, handling in a very clumsy way, in a very awkward way. He was a very intelligent creature. He had already seen writer turning the tap and letting the water flow out of it. So he was trying to do the same. And writer was amazed to see that within a few seconds he was able to let the water flow in drops, and within no time he was able to let the water flow in, come out in full flow. He turned the tap enough loose to let the water come out in full flow. And on certain other occasions, he turned the tap he was not so lucky. He turned the tap onto the other side, on the opposite side. And he was so unhappy and disappointed, and he was chittering, making some sounds with irritation at the tap's failure to cooperate. He was a very intelligent creature. Not only intelligent, he was at the same time very fun-loving as well. He had a lot of toys to play with. He had a rubber ball, which he dribbled like a 4-footed soccer player. He had also marbles, which he used for juggling. Juggling here, it is not throwing. So actually juggling is throwing 2 or more objects into the air and catching them and throwing them again. So he was not juggling that way. He had a flat belly, he had a very flat belly. And what he did was he would keep the marbles, 2 or 3 marbles on the flat belly, and let them roll down. He would let them roll down the belly, but never allowed even a single marble to fall off his body. So that was a game which he loved so much. And the narrator started slowly fearing the plan of transporting Mij to England. Actually, he had to take Mij to England. That plan was actually causing some worry to him, some concern for him. Dreaded the prospect means great fear of something to happen in future. This was going to happen. He had to take him to England, and that was actually causing him some worry. So the British Airlines to London would not fly animals. They would never let a person to take an animal in the plane. So he had booked a flight to Paris on another airline, and from there to London. And this airline people insisted that Mij should be kept in a box of 18 inches square. He should be kept in a box of 18 inches square. So writer had got such a box. He prepared a box and kept Midge into the box and closed the lid and went for a quick meal because he did not have enough time left for the flight. So he went for a quick meal. He kept Midge into the box thinking that at least Midge would get accustomed to the box. So he kept him, closed the lid and went for a quick meal. But when he came back, there was an appalling spectacle. Appalling spectacle means a very shocking sight. There was a complete silence about the box. No sound was coming. But he found that through the air holes and the chinks around the lid. Chinks means the narrow openings. Some narrow openings were at the lid. There, blood had trickled and dried. Horrified, he tore open the box and found Midge totally blood spattered, covered in blood. So Midge, in his attempt to come out of that box, had hurt himself. He had torn the linings into shreds. Writer had no other way. He didn't have enough time. So he had removed all those narrow splinters, the cutting edges, and put once again the miserable Midge back into the box. And he covered the box with the lid. He did not close it. He covered it and kept his hand on it. He did not close it completely. And then went for the car because he had not much time left for the flight. And the driver was taking the car through the streets of Basra like a ricocheting bullet. Ricocheting bullet, a bullet that hits a hard surface and it changes its direction. If you throw a stone into the water, what happens? The moment the stone touches the water, it changes its direction. So similarly, when a bullet hits a hard surface, it deviates, it changes its direction. So car was being taken like a ricocheting bullet in such a fast way. The car was being taken by the driver. And the aircraft was waiting to take off. The people were very angry. The officials were very angry. They were infuriated. They were very angry. And they took the writer to the aircraft. Luckily for him, the seat booked was at the front. So that was he was lucky because he can get some space where he could keep Midge. If it was in the middle rows and all, it will be difficult. So he's at the extreme front, so he would get some space where he can keep Midge without causing troubles to the other passengers. So he covered the floor around his feet with the papers and then rang for the air hostess. He says that the air hostess was the queen of her kind because she allowed him to keep Midge on his lap. But the moment he opened the box, he didn't expect this. Midge ran out of it. He jumped out of it and ran down and disappeared under the rows of seats. And the passengers were making a lot of sounds. They were shrieks and shouts. Some of them were jumping onto their seats. Some of them were shouting, "A rat, a rat." And the writer was also running to catch it. And meanwhile, somebody was eating something. Writer's head fell on it. His face was covered with the curry. And seeing him in that face, the air hostess told him laughingly that he should go back to his seat. He should occupy his seat and she would search for the otter. But it did not take the effort of the lady to find the otter for him because Midge had come back to him by himself and he jumped and sat on his knee. So while writer and Midge stayed in London, they stayed almost for a month. And during that time, Midge would be spending his time. Most of his time he spent for playing. So he had a lot of toys for playing. He had a collection of toys. And then he had ping pong balls. He had marbles, rubber fruit, and a terrapin shell. Terrapin is a kind of turtle found in South Africa. Turtle. Okay, it's a terrapin shell as well. So he loved to play with all these things. And with the ping pong ball, he invented a new game for himself. He was so intelligent enough to invent a new game, less like small children. They invented the games by themselves. So Midge also invented a game by himself, and that game kept him busy for at least half an hour at a time. So he was never tired of playing that game for half an hour. He played it for half an hour's time. So the game he invented was actually writer had a suitcase which got damaged in transit and if it is kept on a surface, it had a slanting top. It had a slanting top. And Midge understood that if he kept the ball on the higher end of it and leave it, it would run down by itself. The ball would run down by itself. So the game he played was, he would keep the ball at the top edge and let the ball run down. Meanwhile, he would run down to the lower end and hide himself. He would ambush. Ambush means to attack suddenly from a hiding position. So he would hide himself, waiting for the ball to come, and the moment that the ball comes, he would jump up and catch it by surprise. So that was a game that he enjoyed so much, and it would keep him busy, engrossed, totally interested in for at least half an hour together. So he would spend it for at least half an hour together, keeping the ball on the top edge, leaving it and running down the lower end, and waiting for the ball, hiding for the ball to come, and then the moment the ball comes, he would jump and catch it by surprise. And this was a game which he enjoyed a lot much. Meanwhile, while they were spending their time in London, Mitch developed some kind of compulsive habits. So compulsive habits, these habits which are impossible to control. Something we do as a habit which had no logic at all. And Mitch developed a compulsive habit. Actually, the compulsive habit he developed was running down the length of a small wall outside a schoolyard. So opposite to Writer's Flat, there was a primary school. It had a low outer wall, almost 30 yards in length. What Midge did was, whenever he was taken out for a walk on their way back home, he never did it when they were going out. When they were coming back only, he would used to do this. He did the same thing whenever they were coming back. He would pull the writer and jump onto the small wall and run down the entire length of the 30 yards, causing the distraction, the lack of attention. The children's attention will be diverted, causing the distraction not only of students, but at the same time of the staff inside. So this was the compulsive habit he developed while he was in London. So he would run down the entire length of the 30 yards of the low wall outside the primary school on his way back home, causing distraction not only of students, but also of the staff inside. So Maxwell also speaks about the inability of the Londoners to identify the otter. Actually, he was not surprised if a Londoner is not able to identify an otter, because otters are not found in England. So if they fail to identify, it's okay. But the wild guesses they made about as to what animal this could be came as a surprise to the writer. So it covered all the animals in the mustelain family, in the family in which the otter also belonged. But they were not able to tell that it is an otter. They guessed it otter as a squirrel, a walrus, a baby seal, a hippopotamus, and a beaver. Somebody said it's a bear cub. Somebody said it is a leopard that had changed its spots. And somebody said it is a brontosaur, which was anything but not an otter. So they were not able to identify it as an otter. But Maxwell says that he was ready to give the highest score to a question raised by a laborer who was digging a hole in the street. So as Maxwell came with Midge, came near him with Midge, the person dropped his tool onto the ground. Keeping his hands on the hips, he asked the narrator, "Here, mister, what is that supposed to be?" So he even failed to, unlike others, even failed to make a wild guess as to what animal this could be. So writer says that he would give the highest award to this fellow. Now we have some more time left, and it's time for you to work in group. So I'm going to allot you some paragraphs. So first we'll divide the class into 4 groups, 2 from boys and 2 from girls. And the first group will be taking care of paragraph number 1 and 2. Second group will be taking care of paragraph 3 and 4. Third group will be 5 and 6, taking care of paragraph 5 and 6. And the fourth group, 7th paragraph. What you are supposed to do is read those paragraphs allotted to you very carefully, discuss in group, and frame questions, as many questions as possible. You can frame short answer questions. You can frame multiple choice questions. You can frame questions on word attack, the meaning, questions with the same meaning, questions, words with the same meaning, words with opposite meaning. So that type of questions you can frame, and frame as many questions as possible. Okay, you can frame the questions, and after that, the next class would be, you can use this, put these questions to the other group, and if they are able to answer, that group will be given mark, and if they are not able to give answer, that will be passed on to the next group, like that. So we'll do that in the next class. Now what you are supposed to do is to frame as many questions as possible from the allotted paragraphs. Discuss in group and frame questions. Okay.